all what happens when the Democrats get control, like the shutdown. They're going to have investigations, they're going to obstruct, they're going to impeach. It's going to be total chaos. They don't want to move the country forward. Trump derangement syndrome is real. American derangement syndrome is real. We have to win. And so we need everybody to go to GOP.com and give us your time and treasure. We have to move this country forward. We have to elect these MAGA warriors across the country to defeat these socialists that are being elected on the left. We can do it, but we need everybody's help.
Woo! I mean, bro, so that's the RNC chair. I was intense. I think he's getting his lessons from old Lindsay there. Wow. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you guys heard the desperation in his voice. The desperation is real. Oh my God, the Democrats are going to investigate. They're going to do things like the Constitution. They're going to follow the Constitution. It's a desperate moment. Socialist, evil, bad things. But don't worry, because we started our war back up again this week too. This isn't going to hurt them at all. And of course, you have to see the most smarmy face on TV representing the Republican Party. Let's talk now. I want you to pay attention to what she says and how Scott Jennings answers. And here.
Okay, so like if we're going to keep going with this, what number of American troops are we willing to commit to keep going? And like, what's your number? Like, how many U.S. troops are you willing to expend to achieve your objectives? And what amount of money? Because like we're not having that conversation, and we need to, because we've already spent $300 billion. We've already lost. Like,
what amount of money am I willing to expend to keep the American people safe from the worst regime in the world? A fair amount.
Yeah, he scrunched his face up when she asked how many troops you're willing to expend. You know, as a troop, as a former troop, screw that guy. Okay, he is sitting there on TV getting a minimum of $10,000 a month. That's the average contract for those clowns. He probably gets a lot more because he's a superstar. Sitting on TV, making faces about my friends, our sons and daughters going to war in an endless war with no end, with this bullshit about ending this regime. They're not ending regimes, okay? They are pumping their stocks. They are pumping the corruption. We know that. Somebody's moving $180 million before every announcement. Somebody. No one's investigating that. But they're not helping average Americans. And that's going to be at the top of this conversation, because it's not good enough for us to be against this. We've talked about this a lot in the show, and you guys know me from my other job. It's not good enough for Democrats to be against that. We have to have a plan, because look, this is what's happening in America. I don't know if you saw this poll this week. Look at this poll from The Guardian and Harris polls. Half of Americans, now what it says here, 57% of the poll believe the economy is worsening, but that's not, I mean, I don't know why they picked that headline, but it's half Americans struggling to afford groceries, gas. But here's the most shock. There's a quiz for you guys. What do 95% of Americans agree on right now? Like, just pick anything. Hot dogs, apple pie, cars. I can't think of a single thing off the top of my head that 95% of Americans agree on, except this. In this poll of 4,000 Americans, 95% believe the U.S. is suffering an affordability crisis, as may report trouble with rising costs and gas. Okay. Amid the war, 95%. Remember how Trump likes to go on TV and say the affordability crisis is made up? Well, that's because the top 20% control 58% of all consumer spending. The top 10% control 49% of all consumer spending. Those who own assets are doing great, but this is what real Americans are facing. Gas, 52% can't afford to believe gas. It's hard to afford. They're saying it's hard. They're having trouble affording it. They're having trouble affording groceries, loan payments, utilities, debt. Look at that list. Health insurance, 42 to 41. Folks, we have a real problem. Okay. And there's no denying. And no matter how much these clowns want to act like everything's fine, that they're not destroying the country, those of us in the real world know there is. And we have an election coming up in the midterm. But let's be honest. Those of the Americans who are running for office, those of us running for office, it's not good enough just to be against this stuff. We have to have a plan for the day after. We have to have a plan for the day after the election, but we also have to have a plan for the day after Donald Trump. Because let's face it, folks, he's not well. And I'm not going to make you suffer through clips of him saying things like we had 111 missiles from the Islamic Republic of Japan. I'm not going to make you suffer through clips of him saying he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, although I clipped it, but I don't even want to see that shit anymore, less like you. No, instead I'm going to go right to our guest, because as always, I've got a great guest, and you know him because he's Brian Tyler Cohen, BTC to those who know him. And he's got a book out that talks about this. And I'm thrilled that he fell in my lap to join us here on Democracy on Friday night, because this is such an important conversation. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get on a great show with a great guest. I'm Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy with FP Wellman every Friday night at the MiasTouch.org with you live. Tell your friends, hit that like button, hit that share button, because you do not want to miss this conversation. Let's go. All right, right. Welcome. It's water, I swear. It's so good to have you guys back here. I'm thrilled, man. Look, like I said at the beginning, there is a lot going on, and it's easy to get bogged down in the here and now and the current events and forget about that we've got an election, and then we got to actually take our country back. We have to have a plan. Look, we talk a lot about Project 2025 and what happened, but what is our plan? What is going to be? What are the kind of things we should be doing? Because, there's lawfare, there's attacks on courts, everything you think about. But we need to talk about what's next. So I'm very, very lucky to have Brian Tyler Cohen. He's the host of No Lie with BTC podcast, billions of views, #1 New York Times bestselling author, Shameless. His new book argues Republicans have mastered the long game of power, while Democrats keep flinching in the moment it matters most. And this is something you've heard on this mouth. So it's called The Day After, How to Wield Power in a Post-Trump World. Not a book of despair. It's a playbook. Let's get BTC on right now. There he is. What's up, brother? How are you?
Thanks for having me, man. Excited to do this.
Wow, welcome to the show. I've been wanting to get you on forever, and now you got a book, even better, and it's a playbook. It's a playbook. You built your entire platform cutting through disinformation, telling people what's going on in real time, breaking news. People turn to you. Billions of people turn to you for the upcoming news. Man, now what made you think or at the same time, I should say, here's what's happening today, but here's what we have to do about it. Like, that's a shift.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to have this debate now because I believe the Democrats are going to take power in 2026.
Yeah.
I believe that they're going to win in 2028. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have hope that the Trump era would end. But I know that when we have those moments of full Democratic control, that those are rare, precious moments. I also know that Democrats have a proclivity to want to use those moments to impanel commissions and then start debates about what we should or shouldn't do. We have to decide whether the process, this is the right process, whether we have to respect the parliamentarian and the filibuster and our norms. And before you know it, that time is gone. We've squandered it, and we haven't made any meaningful, lasting change. And so I'd rather have this debate right now about what needs to be done if and when Democrats get back into power. And frankly, the whole North Star of this book is, as you mentioned, Republicans have abused their power. Democrats have failed to wield their power. And so there is a massive asymmetry between the two sides. I want that asymmetry to go away so that Democrats recognize if we're lucky enough to take power again, that we don't squander that time, that we use it to push forward, push through meaningful, lasting change on healthcare, on climate, on voting rights, you name it. But the time for incrementalism is over. We need to get shit done.
I'm smiling ear to ear because I say this thing. I worked for Republican operatives. I was the veterans advisor for the Lincoln Project under the 8 co-founders. Then I took over as executive director. And one of the things I learned from them as a Democratic staffer was the one thing they would see all the time from these men who've been in the Republican world for all their careers at that point was the biggest failing we had on our side of this equation was we didn't use power. Republicans have never been afraid of using their power. They've never been afraid to wield power when they get it. They believe winning elections is the first priority, and then the second priority is taking the power they've been given. They don't blink an eye about what we say on MSNBC or MeidasTouch at all, right? They don't care, and we spend all this time worrying about what they're saying about us on Fox News, like Mr. Biden did. They don't care, you're right, and the book opens with you pointing out we're at the halfway point of Trump's assault on democracy. Why do you frame it that way? I mean, what does that second half look like if nothing changes?
I mean, the trajectory is only going in one direction. Trump has continued to abuse his power even more and more and more. He has felt that the regular institutions and processes of government don't apply to him. The laws don't apply to him. The Constitution doesn't apply to him. What judges and prosecutors, attorneys, members of Congress say doesn't apply to him. And so it's only going in one direction. Again, a testament to the fact that he believes very clearly that there are no limits to his power. The argument that I make, though, is that while he uses his power for self-enrichment and for his vanity projects and basically to just surround himself with more gold and opulence and wealth and power, that Democrats can and must do it for virtuous reasons, in a virtuous way. We have to be able to do it for healthcare and climate and voting rights. We have to be able to do it to make a more just economy. We have to be able to do it to deliver outcomes for people. So I guess the beginning part of this is the same. The adherence to recognizing that you have power to wield, that's the same.
Yeah.
But in terms of what those deliverables are, obviously could not be more different than what Trump is doing right now.
And that's just it, right? I love the strong and wrong keep beating weak and right. We spend so much time being wrong. I mean, it's. I love the frame where we started this conversation with the Kachinas case for, but I only had you for a while. You lay out a real plan, like, and pieces that include, the Supreme Court reform, term limit.
Yeah.
Let's start there, because there's so much frustration right now. I think a lot of people who watch our show, where it's called On Democracy, we talk about these issues. They're frustrated that the checks and balances aren't working. And the one we had so much faith in for so long was the idea the Supreme Court would save us from these things. And man, I mean, it's just been one, realization after another that that's not the case, is it?
The Supreme Court, I think, is the most important thing to tackle right off the bat. Here's the deal. Like, if we achieve the Herculean feat of winning the House, winning the Senate, winning the White House, already impressive, already going to be very difficult. Then the Herculean feat of actually passing progressive legislation through those bodies and getting them signed into law, until and unless we reform the Supreme Court, and I argue for a Supreme Court expansion from 9 seats to 13 seats, until we do that, we are making the conscious decision to leave in place a body that can and will veto any and all progressive legislation that's put forward. And we know they'll do that because they've already done it for the Voting Rights Act. They've already done it to overturn Roe. They've already done it to heap deference onto Trump, whether it's to send this message that he can commit crimes with impunity, whether it's to send this message that Republicans who engage in insurrection, very much, which is forbidden by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that doesn't apply. So this is a political body. I mean, this is basically Jim Jordan wearing a robe, right? So if we decide to leave in place this body as it stands, then we're just saying we're okay getting caught trying. We're okay passing symbolic victories. We're okay having a law stand for 5 minutes before the Supreme Court inevitably strikes it down. That's not good enough for me. I'm looking for meaningful, lasting change, not to get caught trying. And so I argue for an expansion of the Supreme Court from 9 justices to 13. Throughout the entirety of our history, the number of Supreme Court justices has comported with the number of federal court circuits. The federal court circuits now reach 13, and we still have 9 justices. So there is
revolutionary.
There is a historical precedent to do this, and there's a moral imperative to do this.
And I would argue too, we have to touch on an actual ethics code, and that is enforceable. The idea that the entire court system falls under a code of ethics and a code of regulations, but only the Supreme Court is immune to it, that they only decide amongst themselves. I mean, I don't think the founders, we always go back to the founders, right? With checks and balances and norms and traditions. I think the 2 dirtiest words in our democracy today are norms and traditions. I think there's been nothing more undermining to our ability to move forward as a nation than the idea we have to adhere to the symbolic norms and traditions. We know that Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about that. And now he's taught a whole generation of politicians that norms and traditions are a joke and it doesn't matter. And so now this last, except for me, one of the most frustrating norms and tradition is the idea that the Supreme Court will be somehow self-policing. It's not, is it?
No, it's not. And frankly, you're absolutely right. And the only party that recognizes that is the right. Democrats have to, I think that there is an automatic reflex that if Republicans are going to try and tear down norms and traditions, that the reflex from Democrats is that we have to uphold them. And so we're the party that says, well, we have to defend the filibuster because they want it, they're calling for it to be torn down. We have to defend the parliamentarian. We have to defend our norms. We have to defend the processes of government because they don't like it. And so we have to. And so we hamstring ourselves. And we've seen that in so many different ways. I mean, we saw it, for example, in terms of putting independent redistricting commissions in California and New York, while Republicans have gerrymandered the shit out of Texas and Florida. And so we hamstring ourselves out of this deference to good governance. But frankly, we're going to good government ourselves into obscurity if we don't start recognizing that we got to start fighting back here and being on the same playing field as they are.
Yeah, it goes right back there. It goes to the presidency. It goes to, I highlight all the Tesla lawn sale at the White House, or the UFC sponsored Bud Light sponsored UFC fight on the United States White House grounds. That, it is one thing after another that this imperial president has learned to, just completely blow through these norms. You talk about dismantling this imperial presidency. I mean, what kind of reforms do you think can be put in with the teeth that need to be put into the laws? Obviously, the Hatch Act's a giant freaking joke at this point, right?
The Hatch Act is a joke at this point, and the pardon power has been abused to within an inch of its life. The Nixon era reforms that have kept presidents abiding by the law and not engaging in overt corruption, those have been completely dismantled. So I argue for the codification of a lot of these laws that would actually rein in some of the president's power. We spoke about the Supreme Court. The fact that they are so deferential to Trump as well is in large part why he feels so emboldened to behave the way he does, because they will create out of whole cloth provisions that don't exist to protect him, and they'll ignore provisions that do exist to protect him. So I think that's another argument for the Supreme Court. I know I keep coming back to the court, but that is foundational. And until and unless we do something about that court, we're leaving in place a permanent veto, a permanent rogue branch of government that's always going to be there to make sure that the legislative branch is impotent and that the president, so long as he's a Republican, has total power.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to. So let the short break for our sponsor, and then when I would come back, we got to talk about the economy. That's where I started the show off, and where we're at, and a real solution to the things we talked about at the very beginning of the show. So we'll be right back after our sponsor. You may not know from the look of me, but I'm a cat guy. Yeah, and you know about my dogs. But have you heard of Shugs the cat? Yeah, this is her. She's a little tortoiseshell cat that we've had. I honest to God don't know how long we've had her. I mean, I could tell you, I have no idea how long Shugs has been alive. She joined my family probably a decade ago, and I've taken her across the country with me, and now she lives here in St. Louis. And I don't know how old she is, but you know what? I really want her to live a lot longer. And that's why I feed my cat Smalls. Smalls is a fresh, human-grade cat food that does so much more than just feed your cat. Helps them live a full and healthy life. And most cat food out there is made with meat byproducts, cheap fillers, artificial ingredients, basically stuff that isn't great for your cat. But Big Pet Food does this because it's cheaper to make. What they save in cost, your cat pays for with their health. And I don't want that for Shugs. So Smalls is different. Their fresh recipes are made with at least 80% animal protein. They're gently cooked to retain all their nutrients and flavor. They never add fillers or artificial ingredients. Their food is so healthy that 88% of cat parents say that after feeding Smalls, their cats have better digestion, a softer and shinier coat, and more energy to play. And let me tell you, Shugs needs it because it's actually good for your cats and it's very good for Shugs. So your cat's health and longevity starts with what they eat. Try Smalls. Get 60% off your first order plus free shipping and free treats for life when you go to smalls.com/Fred. So as an On Demoxy listener, you get this deal for a limited time. That's out one last time. 60% off your first order plus free shipping and free treats for life when you head to smalls.com/Fred. Check it out for your cat because I'm doing it for Shugs. Thanks. And we're back. So on the economic side, you make, and like I said, I read with enthusiasm, but you're right. We've got to make a real populist case for, look at this quarter alone, Brian. In this last quarter, we found out that wages stayed stagnant at 3.4% increase. Inflation was 3.9 to 4.3, depending on what numbers you believe. So that wiped out the wages, but corporate profits were 27% up. So we're in a negative cycle here. That's never gonna get better. I mean, you make a case for real populism. These policies do pull well, don't they? I mean, we're not out of the mainstream at this point, are we?
No, not at all. I mean, advocating for what people have been advocating for on the left,
right,
to make sure that the wealthy pay their fair share, to make sure that corporations are paying their fair share. I mean, the great irony of this moment is Trump and Republicans will talk about making America great again. I think harkening back to the 50s and 60s when we had a personal tax rate, a top marginal tax rate of like 70 or 80%. So they want all of the prosperity of a time in our history when the wealthy paid their fair share without any of the spending, without any of the taxation that actually brought about that prosperity. Look, I don't think that there's anybody on either side of the aisle who doesn't recognize the extent to which this system is rigged in favor of the wealthy in this country, the extent to which Trump especially will come into office on this pretext that he's looking out for the little guy. Talks about housing and rent and groceries. Just today, we heard from Donald Trump that he won't even sign his housing bill. It's a bill that the Republicans themselves passed so that Donald Trump could hold true to one of his own campaign promises. Even he won't do it because God forbid you abide by your campaign promise and help regular people and don't heap riches onto your donors or your family. God forbid.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. Do you think? Do you see a path now for Democrats to seize that populism? I mean, they've been. It's baffling to a lot of people how they haven't in the past, right? I mean, we have to be critical of our own side in this fight, right?
100%. And look, I also shoulder blame in that. Like for me, my principal issues are democracy because it's foundational. You can't get anything done on healthcare, on climate, on voting rights if democracy isn't upheld. So that is my principal issue. And I got into politics because of climate change. I think, I mean, we like that is the existential crisis of our time. And until and unless that's taken care of, or dealt with in an appropriate manner, then we're just kind of tinkering around the edges here. But that notwithstanding, I do think that if Trump has shown us anything, it is the blueprint for how to reach people who are otherwise pretty disaffected in this country. And there is an affordability crisis. And you open the show very, very adeptly pointing out the fact that there are 95% of Americans who believe that. You couldn't get 95% of Americans to agree on what day of the week it is. So the fact that 95% of Americans are coming out saying that there's an affordability crisis is a blinking red light. And Trump correctly diagnosed that in 2024. The problem is he is so unwilling to actually do anything about it that we have an opportunity now to step into the void left by Trump and Republicans. And there is a void left on housing, on groceries, on healthcare, you name it. But this Republican Party isn't willing to do anything about it because they're too beholden to their donors and everybody else who's in the same tax bracket as Trump.
And that's where it is. And your audience skews young. My audience skews older, but we're all in the same fight of fighting for our democracy. And I always try to get them. It's like if they feel it, I think the fight is all defense right now. There's no plan. There's no vision. Right? It feels like what's the one thing from this book you want them to take away? Believe me, it's actually possible.
I think that the main thing that I'm trying to do with this book, my North Star in this book, is to push folks either in the Democratic Party, these elected officials, or the electorate more broadly to recognize that there is hope that Democrats can and will take back power in the future, but to push people to embrace this idea that we don't want to go back to a status quo that so many people voted against and railed against. We have to embrace a different kind of America that focuses on delivering for people. But the only way you do that is by fighting for it. A quick anecdote that I can give is I interviewed Gavin Newsom a few months back and talked to him about this idea of court expansion. He was very chilly on the idea. And then I spoke to him on his podcast just a few weeks ago about the book. Like we had a conversation about this book, which is seeking to get Democrats to wield power. And we were talking about the Supreme Court. And he said, you know what? I'm coming around to your idea. We have to stop winning arguments. We have to start winning. And so in a book that tries to push Democrats to wield power, I persuaded a Democrat to adopt the position of wielding power. So the blueprint works. I just want to have the opportunity to make the case to as many people as possible.
And with that, where do they find it? Where do they find it? You're going on a book tour. I mean, you're not hard to find normally. Where can you find the book? Where can you find the book? There's arguments made.
So you can go get the book at briantylercohen.com/book. And there at that website, you can both find a link to pre-order it at all of the retailers. And you can also find links to the book tour. So I'm going to be in DC on Tuesday next week. I'm going to be in New York on Wednesday next week. And I'm going to be in LA on Saturday, the 18th. So I'd love to see folks in person. There's still tickets available. You can find everything, the pre-order link for the book and book tour tickets at briantylercohen.com/book.
And we need to get you to St. Louis. It's a crime. Everybody skips St. Louis, man. We're halfway between New York.
I know.
We'd love to get you. Brian, it's a thrill. It's a joy to have you here. I'm so thrilled you're to join us. And I am so happy. Literally, I'm reading the book. It is It pertains to my current job, and I do believe the same thing. We have to fight, and it's not good enough to say what we're against, it's what we're for, because we do have popular things. People do want us to fight for affordability. They do want healthcare they can afford. They do want to fight this corruption and investigate these things. So those aren't outside the mainstream. They're people are demanding them at supermajority level. So thanks for the playbook. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to talking to you again soon, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Best luck in the campaign trail.
Thank you, sir. Cheers. Bye now. Oh man, great conversation with Brian. I was thrilled to have him on the show. I'm a fan. I had a chance to work with him on some other things, and this first I've actually had him as a guest. But look, the reason I did is the book is necessary. The book is great. I mean, I don't say that often. I know you guys are sick of me saying that the authors we have on. I've had a lot of authors lately. Get their book, but get the book. It is a thing. And look, I bring this back up again, folks. I mean, I just look at these numbers. Look at these numbers, folks. This is us. This is everyone. You know, PNC Bank did a study back in October, and it came out showing that 67% of people surveyed are living paycheck to paycheck. 67%. And I use that number a lot to talk about this. Look, folks, this is real America. It's not the mainstream to say we got a problem. America's economy is not working. It's not working for average people. It's only working for the rich. And there's never been a clear divide in this country in our history. 95% of Americans agree we have an affordability crisis. Folks, this is not out of the mainstream. So you need to work for candidates who are going to fight for you. You need to work for candidates who are going to do something. You got to work for candidates who understand the problem and the problem set and aren't going to do studies or think about it or have a convening. We're going to get to work when they get to Washington, D.C. And then you got to hold them accountable to get the work done. And folks, enough is enough. Okay. You need to be angry, but that anger needs to turn into action. It's not good enough to be clicking and being angry. It's turning that into anger, into action. That means getting out, get out of your house, go to the uncomfortable place. Look, I tell people all the time, you just want to grab your favorite candidate's signs, get 10 of your friends and stand on the side of the major thoroughfare through your district. That helps. Bring donuts, bring sodas, just stay out there and honk. Okay. Get the word out that there's alternatives to the broken system we have, because it's not Republican. It just isn't. There's no Republican. I saw a sign driving through part of my area the other day, pro-labor Republican. That's not a thing. I don't care who they are. I don't have to know anything about that person. There's no such thing right now as a pro-labor Republican. Okay? That's a lie. Not when the Trump administration is getting rid of collective bargaining agreements. Not when the Trump administration was anti-union administration in memory. Okay? Those days are over. Stop believing the lies. Pick someone who's going to fight for you. And right now, it's no one in the Republican Party because they're so afraid of Donald Trump. And they will not waver one bit from him. There's a reason the only voices opposing Donald Trump are the ones who are leaving office. So that's your mission. That's our calling. I promise we'll keep on fighting and here at On Democracy. It was great to have Brian on board. I hope you'll get the book. In the meantime, you know where to find me on our Substack. If you haven't subscribed at this point, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's free. And I don't spam me. I only do like 1 or 2 a week. Tell you about that other thing I'm doing right now. It's totally free. You don't have to pay. I'd love you to pay. You don't have to. It's great information. Use that. fpwellman.substack.com is a way to keep up everything and my larger thoughts on these kind of issues. With that, thanks for joining us every week right here in the Minus section with fpwellman.com or substack.com is our website too. Thanks for joining us. We got a lot to do.